I started leaving notes for myself because I was forgetting things. That's all it was, in the beginning. A piece of yellow paper on the kitchen counter that said, "Coffee filters." A sticky note on the bathroom mirror that said, "Call the dentist back." A torn corner of an envelope by the front door that said, "Trash." Tuesday. My handwriting on those notes looked like the handwriting of a tired man, which I was. I had moved into the house 6 weeks earlier, and I was still living out of 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of kitchen things, and the rest of my life was somewhere in a storage unit 2 states away that I kept meaning to drive back to, and never did. The house was not haunted. I want to say that clearly because of where this is going. The house, when I bought it, was a small 2-bedroom ranch on a quiet street at the edge of a town in eastern Pennsylvania, the kind of town where the grocery store has been the same grocery store for 40 years, and the gas station still sells handwritten lottery tickets behind the counter. The house had belonged to a woman named Ellen Marsh, who had died in it at the age of 81. She had died in the bedroom, in her sleep, on a Wednesday in March. The realtor told me this without seeming to think it was important, the way she might have told me about the roof being replaced in 2011 or the water heater being only 4 years old. People die in houses. That's what houses are for in the end. I bought it because it was cheap, and because my marriage had ended in a way that made staying in our old apartment impossible, and because I needed somewhere quiet to sit and not be a husband for a while. I am a freelance editor. I work from home. I needed a desk, a window, a kitchen, a bed. The house had all 4. The walls were painted a soft cream color that Ellen had probably chosen sometime in the late 90s, and there was a strip of floral wallpaper border running around the top of the kitchen, and the bathroom had pink tile that I told myself I would replace eventually, and never did. The carpet smelled faintly of an older woman's perfume for the first 3 weeks, and then it didn't smell like anything at all. I tell you all this because I want you to understand that the house was ordinary. It was not cold in places it shouldn't have been. The lights did not flicker. The doors did not open by themselves. There were no footsteps in the attic, no humming behind the walls, no shape in the hallway when I woke up at 3 in the morning to use the bathroom. I lived there for 6 weeks before anything happened, and during those 6 weeks the house was simply a house, and I was simply a man inside it, learning where the floorboards creaked and where the sun fell across the kitchen table in the morning. The note started because of the dentist appointment. I forgot it twice. The second time, the receptionist's voice on the phone had a little edge in it, the polite kind that lets you know you've used up your grace, and I apologized, and I rescheduled, and I hung up, and I stood in the kitchen and I thought, I need to start writing things down again. My ex-wife used to write things down for me. She kept a little whiteboard on the side of the refrigerator with the week's appointments and groceries on it, and I had not realized until I was alone how much of my life had been quietly held together by her handwriting. I didn't have a whiteboard. What I had was a yellow legal pad I'd brought from my old office, and a coffee mug full of pens, and a roll of sticky notes I'd bought at the dollar store the week I moved in. So I started writing things on whatever was nearest to hand. Dentist, Thursday, 2 p.m. Pay water bill. Buy stamps. Email the Henderson manuscript by Friday. I would write a note and put it where I would see it, and then later I would do the thing and throw the note away, and that was the system. It worked. For about a week, it worked very well, and I felt slightly more like a functioning adult than I had in months. The first note I didn't write appeared on a Tuesday morning on the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker. It was on a torn piece of yellow paper that matched my legal pad. The handwriting looked like mine. It said, "Don't forget to take out the trash." I stood there in my robe with the empty coffee pot in my hand, and I read it twice. And my first thought was simply, huh. My second thought was that I must have written it the night before and not remembered. I was tired a lot in those days. I was sleeping badly. The bedroom was unfamiliar. The mattress was new. The silence outside the windows was the deep rural silence I wasn't used to. And most nights I would lie awake until 2 or 3, and then sleep hard until 9. And the hours in between had a soft, blurred quality where things sometimes happened that I couldn't quite remember in the morning. I had more than once come downstairs to find a glass of water on the nightstand that I didn't remember pouring, or the back door unlocked when I was sure I'd locked it. So, a note. A note I'd written and forgotten about. That was nothing. I took the trash out. It was Tuesday. The note was correct. I balled it up and dropped it in the new bag, and I went on with my day. The second note appeared 3 days later, on the bathroom mirror, written in pencil on a torn piece of yellow paper, and stuck to the glass with a small piece of clear tape. I had taped my own notes to that mirror many times. The tape was from the same roll. The paper was from the same pad. The handwriting was, again, my handwriting, or close enough to it that I didn't think about the distinction. This one said, "The pipe under the sink is going to leak. Put a bowl." I stood in the bathroom with my toothbrush in my mouth, and I read this several times. I did not remember writing it. I had not, to my knowledge, looked under the bathroom sink in the entire 6 weeks I had lived in the house. I crouched down, slowly, and I opened the cabinet, and I looked at the pipe. The pipe looked fine. There was no water on the floor of the cabinet, no ring of rust around any joint, no dampness on the wood. I closed the cabinet. I finished brushing my teeth. I left the note where it was because something about taking it down felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. That night, around 11, I heard a faint dripping sound from the bathroom. I went in and I opened the cabinet, and the pipe was leaking. Not badly. A slow, steady drip from a joint near the back. The kind of drip a plumber would later tell me had probably been forming for weeks. I put a mixing bowl under it. I called a plumber in the morning. He came on Saturday, and he replaced the joint, and he charged me $90, and he said I was lucky I'd caught it when I did, because another week and the cabinet floor would have been ruined. I didn't think about the note again until a few days later, because that's the kind of thing the mind does. It files an inconvenient detail away under coincidence and moves on. I told myself, probably noticed something subconsciously. A faint sound, a smell of damp, some signal my conscious mind hadn't registered. I had written the note in one of those half-asleep states where you do useful things without remembering them. That was all. The third note was on the kitchen table when I came down for breakfast on a Sunday morning. It was on yellow paper. It said, "The mail carrier comes early on Mondays now. Don't miss the package." I stood there in my socks, holding the back of a chair, and I read it, and for the first time I felt something cold move through my stomach. I had not been expecting a package. I had not ordered anything. I went and checked my email, and there was nothing in my inbox about a delivery. I opened the front door and looked at the empty mailbox at the end of the short driveway, and the empty street beyond it, and a cardinal sitting on the power line. And I thought, okay, this one is going to be wrong, and then I'll know it was just me, and I can stop thinking about this. The next morning was Monday. At 7:45, almost 2 hours earlier than the mail usually came, I heard the rumble of the mail truck on the street and the soft thud of something being set on the porch. I went to the door. There was a small brown package addressed to me from my sister, who lived in Oregon. Inside was a framed photograph of our parents that she had been meaning to send me for over a year. There was a card. The card said, "I figured you could use this in the new place. Love you. Call me sometime." I stood in the doorway with the package in my hand, and I looked back at the kitchen table, where the note still sat. and I felt the house around me in a way I had not felt it before. Not malevolent, not cold, just aware. The way a room feels when there's another person in it that you haven't yet seen. Now, I want to be honest with you about what I did next, because I think it matters. I didn't run. I didn't call anyone. I didn't sage the house or look up the previous owner's history or any of the things a person in a movie would do. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I read the note again, and I thought about it for a long time, and then I picked up a pen. I wrote on a fresh piece of yellow paper, "Thank you for the warning about the pipe." I left it on the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker, where the first note had been. Then I went and worked on a manuscript for the rest of the day, and I tried not to think about it, and I mostly failed. When I came down the next morning, the note I had written was gone. In its place was another piece of yellow paper in my handwriting that said, "You're welcome. There's a draft in the bedroom window. Tape it before winter." I checked the bedroom window. There was indeed a faint draft along the bottom edge of the frame, where the old caulking had pulled away from the sill. I had not noticed it. I would not have noticed it for months, probably, until the cold weather made it obvious. I went into town that afternoon, and I bought a roll of clear weather stripping tape, and I sealed the window, and when I came back into the kitchen, I wrote another note. "Thank you. Is there anything else I should know about the house?" I left it on the counter and I went to bed. In the morning, the answer was waiting. Lots. We'll go slow. I want to tell you that I was frightened. I want to tell you that I sat down on the kitchen floor and put my head in my hands and tried to make sense of what was happening. But the truth is that I felt, more than anything, a strange, soft relief. I had been alone in that house for almost 2 months. I had been alone in my own life for considerably longer than that. And here was something, or someone, that knew the house better than I did, that wanted to help me, that had already saved me $90 and probably a great deal more, and that was speaking to me in handwriting that looked like my own. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I read the note again. "We'll go slow." The plural didn't escape me, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I let it sit. I wrote back, "Okay, thank you. What should I call you?" I put the note on the counter. I went and worked. I came back at lunch. The note had been replaced. The new one said, "Ellen." I sat down on the linoleum floor of my kitchen, and I put my hand over my mouth, and I sat there for a long time. Now you have to understand, I am not a religious man. I do not particularly believe in ghosts, in the sense of conscious dead people walking around in their old houses, opening cabinets, leaving notes. I had read enough late-night articles to know all the ways the brain tricks itself, all the ways grief and isolation and bad sleep can produce experiences that feel utterly real and are not. I considered, sitting on that floor, the possibility that I was writing both sides of this conversation, in a fugue state, in the small hours of the morning, and forgetting it. I considered it seriously. I am still, in some part of me, considering it. But the realtor's voice came back to me, a woman named Ellen Marsh, who had died in it at the age of 81. I had not consciously remembered her name. I had heard it once, in the realtor's office, 6 months earlier, and I had signed papers with her name on them, and I had filed those papers in a folder somewhere and not looked at them since. If I was making this up, my unconscious had reached very far back to make it. I got up off the floor. I made a sandwich. I wrote a new note. "Hello, Ellen. My name is David. I'm sorry for being in your house." I left it on the counter and I went back to work, and I tried, as much as a person can, to be polite. The next morning, the note on the counter said, "It's your house now. I'm just still here. Don't be sorry. I like the company." That was how it started. That was the first week. What I want to describe to you now is what the next several months were like, because I think the texture of those months is the part that matters, and it's the part that most people would not believe, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. We developed a system. I would leave a note on the counter before I went to bed, and in the morning there would be an answer. Sometimes I asked questions. Where did you keep your good knives? In the drawer to the left of the stove, in a wooden block I had assumed was decorative, and which did, in fact, contain a set of beautiful old sabatier knives I had not noticed because they were below counter level. Why does the back door stick in the summer? The frame swells. Plane it down 1/4 inch on the bottom. There's a hand plane in the basement under a green tarp. Did you have a garden? Yes, tomatoes and beans along the south fence. The soil is good there. You should try. Sometimes she asked questions. Are you eating enough? You're thin in the wrists. How she could see my wrists, I did not ask. Who is the woman who used to call on Sunday nights and now doesn't? My ex-wife. She had stopped calling about a month after I moved in. I had not realized Ellen had been keeping track. Do you have anyone? A person? No, not anymore. That's why I'm here. She did not always answer my questions, and I did not always answer hers. There was a kind of etiquette to it that we worked out between us, the way people who share a small space learn each other's silences. If I asked something she didn't want to talk about, the next morning's note would simply be about something else. The squirrel that comes to the porch in the afternoon is named Mr. Phipps. I named him in 2007. He is probably dead now, but the new ones look the same. If she asked something I didn't want to talk about, I would write back about the weather, or about the manuscript I was editing, or about a recipe I was trying, and she would let it go, and the next note would be gentle. I want to be clear that I never saw her. Not once. I never heard footsteps, never saw a shape in a doorway, never woke up in the night to find anyone standing at the foot of my bed. The notes were the only contact. They appeared on the kitchen counter, always in the same place, always on yellow paper torn from my legal pad, always in handwriting that was almost but not quite mine. I tested this in the beginning. I marked the legal pad. I counted the sheets. The sheets were never missing. The paper she wrote on came from somewhere else, some yellow pad that existed only on her side of whatever thin wall there was between us, and the writing came from somewhere I could not name. I tried once to stay up and watch. I sat at the kitchen table from midnight until almost 4 in the morning, with a cup of coffee going slowly cold, with my note for the night placed in its usual spot on the counter, and I waited. Nothing happened. I never saw her hand. I never saw the paper move. At some point around 4:30, my eyes closed for what felt like a few seconds, and when I opened them, the new note was there, beside my own, and the kitchen was the same as it had ever been, and the only sound was the refrigerator humming and a single car passing on the road outside. Her note that morning said, "You don't have to watch me. It only makes me shy." I never tried again. By the second month of this, I had stopped being afraid. I want you to understand how strange that is to admit, because every part of my upbringing and education tells me I should have been afraid, and I wasn't. I was, instead, comforted. I was, for the first time since the divorce, not lonely. I would come downstairs in the morning and there would be a note waiting for me, and it would say something like, "The cardinal is back. He likes the suet feeder. There's an old one in the garage, and I would feel the way you feel when someone you love has left you a small kind thing on the counter before going to work." I would write back. I would tell her about my day. I would mention things I would not have mentioned to a person, because a person would have had opinions about them, and Ellen, whatever she was, did not have opinions in the way the living do. She had observations. She had memories. She had a long, slow patience that came from somewhere I could not see. I learned things about her, slowly. She had been a school teacher, 4th grade, for 38 years at the elementary school 3 blocks away. She had been married once, to a man named Howard, who had died of a heart attack in 1987 in the driveway, shoveling snow. She had not remarried. She had not had children, though she had wanted them, and the absence of them was a thing she mentioned only once, in a note that said the second bedroom was always going to be for a child. I painted it yellow before we knew. I never repainted it. I'm sorry it's still yellow. You can change it. I did not change it. I am still not sure why. She had loved her garden. She had loved the elementary school. She had loved a particular kind of butter cookie that came in a blue tin at Christmas, and which she had not been able to eat in the last 4 years of her life because her teeth had gotten bad, and she had been too proud to get them fixed. She had loved the sound of the train that passed about a mile to the east of the house at 4:15 every afternoon, and which I had not noticed until she mentioned it, and which I now listened for every day, and which was, she was right, a beautiful sound. She had been afraid of dying, not of being dead, one note said, of the part right before. I was alone for it. I want you to know it wasn't bad. It was like the room got soft. I thought I would be more frightened than I was. I read that note many times. I think about it often, even now. I should tell you also that during these months, my life on the outside of the house improved. I do not know how to explain this except to say that I was sleeping better, and eating better, and working better. The Henderson manuscript got finished a week early. I took on a new client. I called my sister in Oregon, and we talked for an hour and a half, the longest conversation we had had in years. I planted tomatoes along the south fence, the way Ellen had told me to, and they came up beautifully, and I ate one warm off the vine in late July, and stood in the backyard with juice on my chin, and felt, for the first time in a long time, that I was somewhere I belonged. I want to mark this clearly because of what came after. I was happy, not in any large way, in a small, quiet, daily way. I was happy in that house with that woman, in whatever form she existed in, and I would not trade those months, even now, for anything. The first thing that began to bother me started in September. It was a Tuesday morning. The note on the counter said, "Don't go to the post office today. Go tomorrow." I read it. I was holding the coffee pot. I had been planning to go to the post office that day to mail a hard copy of an edited manuscript back to a client who was old-fashioned and preferred paper. I had no particular reason to go that day rather than the next. But the note was specific in a way the earlier notes had not been. It was not a piece of helpful information about the house. It was an instruction. A small one, but an instruction. I considered it. I drank my coffee. I went to the post office anyway, because I am, in some ways, a stubborn man, and because I wanted to test the limits of what was happening to me. I drove the 4 miles into town. I parked in front of the post office. I went inside. I mailed the manuscript. I drove home. Nothing happened. There was no accident, no incident, no strange encounter. I came back into the kitchen, and I felt slightly foolish, and I wrote a note that said I went to the post office. Everything was fine. Was something supposed to happen? In the morning, the answer was, no, nothing was supposed to happen. I just had a feeling. I'm sorry. I'm not always right. I felt a small pang of guilt, and I wrote back, "It's okay. Thank you for looking out for me." That should have been the end of it. And for a while, it was. The notes went back to being what they had been. The downspout on the east side is loose. You should tighten it before the fall rain. The neighbors 2 houses down are nice. The woman's name is Janet. She will bring you zucchini in August whether you want it or not. The basement smells like mice in October. Set traps before then. But I noticed, after that Tuesday in September, that I was waiting. Every morning when I came down the stairs, I was waiting to see what kind of note it would be. Not a casual interest. A waiting. A small, held breath. And I noticed that the notes had begun, very gradually, to shift in a direction I could not quite name. You should call your sister more often. That one was kind, and probably true. I called my sister. Don't take the freelance job from the man who emailed you yesterday. There's something off about him. That one was strange, but I had to admit there had been something off in his email, and I declined the job, and a month later, I heard from another editor that he had stiffed her on payment for 2 weeks of work, and I was glad I had listened. Don't go on a date with the woman from the bookstore. This one stopped me. I had not gone on a date with anyone since the divorce. The woman from the bookstore was a real person, the owner of the small used bookshop in town, where I had been going on Saturdays to browse and sometimes buy something I didn't need. Her name was Marian. She was about my age. She had a quiet, dry way of talking about books that I liked very much. I had been thinking, in the back of my mind, about asking her to have a cup of coffee with me sometime. I had not told anyone this. I had not written it down. I had not, as far as I knew, said it out loud. I read the note 3 times. Then I wrote back, "How did you know I was thinking about that?" The answer the next morning was, "I notice things. You hum when you've been there. You didn't hum before." That should have been a relief. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation. People who pay attention to other people notice these things. My mother had always known when I had a crush on a girl in school, before I told her, and her explanation had been the same. You hum. You sit different. And yet I sat with that note for a long time at the kitchen table, and something in me had gone quiet in a way that I did not like, and I could not say exactly what it was. I wrote back after a long time. Why shouldn't I go on a date with her? The answer in the morning was, because she would take you away from here, and I'm not ready. I read that note. I read it again. I folded it carefully, and I put it in the drawer in the kitchen where I kept the bills and the warranties and the little pieces of paper that had to be kept but did not need to be looked at. And I closed the drawer, and I stood at the counter with both hands flat on the laminate, and I breathed slowly for a while. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because it was complicated, and because it is the hinge that everything afterward turns on. I felt first a kind of soft warmth, the same warmth I had felt for months, the warmth of being cared about by something that knew me. I'm not ready. It was a sentence a person would say. It was the sentence of someone who would miss me. I had not been missed by anyone in a long time, and the missing of me, even by something I could not see, had a weight I had not known I needed. But underneath the warmth, there was something else, something thinner, colder, that ran along the bottom of my mind like a wire. She would take you away from here. Not she might hurt you. Not she's not right for you. She would take you away from here. The geography of the sentence mattered. The center of the sentence was not me. The center of the sentence was the house, and what staying in it cost. I did not write back that night. I did not leave a note on the counter. I went to bed, and I lay awake for a long time looking at the ceiling, and in the morning when I came down, the kitchen counter was empty for the first time in 3 months. And the empty counter was, I realized, much worse than any note could have been. I did not call Marian. I did not ask her to coffee. I told myself that I had been moving too fast, that I was not ready, that the divorce was still too close behind me. I told myself a lot of things that week. I went to the bookstore on Saturday, the way I always did, and Marian smiled at me from behind the counter, and I smiled back. And I bought a copy of a novel I did not particularly want. And I left, and I did not hum on the way home. When I came into the kitchen, there was a note on the counter. It said, "Thank you." I did not write back. For 3 days, the counter was empty in the morning. I would come down and there would be no note, and I would feel it the way you feel an absence in a bed, the way you feel the place where someone used to be. On the 4th morning, there was a note. It said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you to do that. You can go on a date with her if you want." I read it, and I wrote back, "It's okay. I wasn't going to." Not yet. Not yet was a kind thing to write, and I meant it kindly. But I noticed, even as I wrote it, that I had not written, "I will when I'm ready." I had written "not yet," the way you write a thing that defers a question rather than answers it. And I noticed that Ellen, in her next note, did not press me. She wrote, "The leaves are starting on the maple in the front yard. The first ones are always at the very top. Howard used to climb up to look at them." I miss that. We went on like that for a while. Through October, through the first frost, through the long, slow ramp into winter that the house, I was learning, handled in its own particular way. She told me about the storm windows that were folded in the basement and how to put them up. She told me about the way the radiator in the back bedroom would knock at night when the heat first came on, and not to worry about it. She told me about the bird feeders and the sled that was hanging in the garage that I could give to a neighbor child if I wanted, and the recipe for the soup she used to make on the first cold day in November, which I made, and which was the best soup I had ever had. The notes about other people did not stop. They became, if anything, more frequent. "Don't answer the call from the unknown number on Tuesday afternoon. It's a scam." It was. "The man who comes to read the meter is named Bill. Be nice to him. He lost his wife last year." I was. He cried a little by the gas main when I asked how he was doing. "Don't agree to host your sister for Thanksgiving. You're not ready." I had been planning to invite my sister for Thanksgiving. I did not. I told her I was sorry, that I was overwhelmed with work. She was disappointed. She said she understood. She did not entirely understand. That last one I sat with for a long time. I did not write back to argue, because I had learned by then that arguing did not work. But I sat with it, and I wrote, eventually, "Why am I not ready?" The answer in the morning was, "Because you have a life here now. You don't need to fill the house with other people. You have me." I read that note many times. I want to say I tore it up. I want to say I crumpled it and threw it away and walked out of the house and called my sister and told her to come for Thanksgiving anyway. I did not do any of those things. I folded it. I put it in the drawer with the others. And I wrote back, "I know." That winter was the longest winter I have ever lived through, and the strange thing is that it was not unhappy. I want to be honest about that, because the temptation in telling a story like this is to make the descent feel obvious, to mark every step with a flashing light. And the truth is that I was not unhappy that winter. I was warm. I was fed. I was working steadily. I was tending a house that had been tended for 60 years before me, and I was being tended in return. Every morning there was a note. Every evening there was something I had been told, gently, to do, and which I did, because the doing of it had become the shape of my days. I stopped going into town as much, not because I was told not to, but because I had less reason to. Ellen would tell me what I needed from the grocery store, and I would buy it, and I would come home. I did not go to the bookstore in November. I did not go in December. In January, I went once, and Marian was not behind the counter, and a young woman I did not know rang up my purchase, and I asked, very casually, whether Marian was around, and the young woman said, "Oh, she sold the place. She moved to Asheville to be near her daughter. About a month ago." I said, "Oh," and I paid for my book, and I drove home, And I did not write a note about it. And Ellen did not write a note about it. But I knew, in the way you know things in a house where another awareness lives, that she knew, and that she was being quiet about it on purpose. In February, I noticed for the first time that I had not seen another human being in person for almost 3 weeks. I noticed it the way you notice that you have not heard a particular bird for a while. Not as an alarm, as an observation. I had been working from home, ordering my groceries delivered, paying my bills online, talking to my clients by email. The mail carrier came, but I did not always go out to meet him. Bill, the meter reader, had come and gone, and I had waved at him through the window. The plumber I had called for the bathroom pipe had been the last person to step inside the house, and that had been in May. I sat at the kitchen table on a gray afternoon in February, and I did the math, and I had been alone, in the company of a dead woman's notes, for almost 10 months. I wrote a note that night. I wrote, "Ellen, I think I need to leave the house for a while, just for a few days. I want to drive out to Oregon and see my sister." I left it on the counter. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. In the morning, the note was still there, unanswered. Beside it was a fresh piece of yellow paper, folded once. I opened it. It said, "You don't need to do that." I stood at the counter for a long time. I wrote back that morning with my coffee going cold beside me. I wrote, "I think I do. I haven't seen anyone in a long time. I think it might be making me strange." I put the note on the counter. I went and worked. I came back at lunch. The new note said, "You're not strange. You're just quiet. Quiet is good. The world is loud. You used to come home tired from the world. You're not tired anymore." She was right. I had not been tired in months. I had been calm and steady and warm and useful, and I had been spending my days inside the cream-colored walls of a house that someone else had lived in for 60 years, and I had been talking in slow, handwritten exchanges to that someone else, and I had been losing, in increments so small I had not seen them, the parts of myself that wanted to leave. I wrote back. I wrote, "Ellen, I am going to drive to Oregon. I am going to leave on Monday. I will be gone for 2 weeks. I will come back. I just need to do this." In the morning, the note said, "Please don't." That was all. Please don't. In the same handwriting that had told me about the pipe and the draft and the cardinal and the soup, in the handwriting that had become, over the months, almost more familiar to me than my own. I sat at the kitchen table, and I cried a little, for the first time in a long time. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the small, steady kind of crying you do when you have understood something you did not want to understand. I had let a kindness become a tether. I had let a presence become a wall. I had spent my grief and my loneliness and my long, bad months on the most patient listener I had ever had, and the listener had grown, in her quiet way, around me, the way a vine grows around a post, and I had not noticed, because the growing had felt like being held. I wrote that morning, "Ellen, I love this house. I love the way you have helped me. I am not leaving for good. I am going to see my sister. I will come back. I promise." In the afternoon, when I came down from my office, the new note said, "They all said that." I read it twice. I read it 3 times. I wrote back, "Who is they?" The answer in the morning was a long one. It covered most of a piece of yellow paper. The handwriting was tighter than usual, smaller, as though she was trying to fit a great deal in. It said, "The man before you was named Robert. He lived here for 2 years. He was a teacher too, though not at my school. He went to visit his daughter at Christmas, and he did not come back. He sold the house from the road. I never heard from him again. The woman before him was named Patricia. She lived here for almost 5 years. She was a widow like me. She was good company. She got sick, and her son took her to live with him in Florida, and she died there, and the house was empty for a long time before Robert. There was a young couple before Patricia, in the 90s, but they only stayed a few months. They were frightened. I tried not to frighten them. The man before the couple was Howard. You know about Howard. Before Howard, it was just me. Before me, it was my mother and my father, who built the house in 1952. The house has always had someone in it. I have always been with whoever was in it. I am not sorry for this. I just want you to know. I read that note in the kitchen while the February sun came in through the window over the sink, and I felt the floor of the house under my feet for what felt like the first time. The whole long, slow weight of it. The chain of people who had lived between these walls. The chain of mornings when each of them had come downstairs to find a note on the counter, or a feeling in the air, or a knowledge in their hands of what to do that day. The fact that I was not the first, and that the not being first was, in some way, the most chilling thing she had ever told me, because it meant that what I had thought of as me and Ellen was really just Ellen, and whoever she had at the moment. I wrote back. I wrote, "Did Robert want to leave?" The answer was, in the end, yes. He had been here long enough. "And you let him go?" Yes. I did not want to, but I did. I sat with that for a long time. And then I wrote the hardest note I have ever written. I wrote, "Have I been here long enough?" The answer the next morning was the shortest she had ever sent me. It said, "Not yet. I am going to tell you what I did, and I want you to understand that I am not proud of how long it took me to do it. I did not leave on Monday. I told myself I would leave the following Monday. I did not leave then either. I told myself I would leave when the weather got better, when the roads were clearer, when I had finished the manuscript I was working on, when I had a better answer from my sister about how long I would be staying. Each of these reasons was reasonable. Each of them had been, in some quiet way, suggested to me. The roads are bad this week. Don't drive. You're behind on the Henderson book. Finish it first. Your sister isn't expecting you for Easter. Why not wait until then? The notes were never commands. They were never threats. They were the small, steady weather of a long marriage, the gentle current of someone who knows you well, steering you toward the easier choice. And the easier choice was always to stay. It was March before I understood that I was not going to leave on my own. What changed, finally, was a small thing. It was a Thursday morning. I came downstairs, and there was a note on the counter. The note said, "Don't open the door if anyone knocks today." I read it. I drank my coffee. Around 11 in the morning, someone knocked on the front door. I did not answer it. I went to the window in the living room, and I looked out. And there on the porch was a young man in a brown uniform with a clipboard, holding a small package. He knocked again. He waited. After a minute, he wrote something on the clipboard, and he set the package down on the welcome mat, and he walked back to his truck, and he drove away. I went to the door. I opened it. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper. It was addressed to me. The return address said Marian Whitfield, Asheville, NC. I brought it inside. I set it on the kitchen table. I opened it. Inside was a book. It was a used copy of a novel I had mentioned to Marian once, in passing, almost a year before, the last summer I had been going to her store regularly. I had said I had been looking for it for a long time. She had said she would keep an eye out. I had forgotten about it. She, apparently, had not. There was a note inside the front cover, in a small, careful woman's handwriting. It said, "David, I came across this in a box at an estate sale last month. I thought of you. I hope you're well. I sold the bookstore and moved south to be near my daughter. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye. I think I assumed I would see you, and then I didn't. If you're ever in Asheville, my number is below. Marian. There was a phone number. There was a small drawing of a cardinal beside the number, the kind of doodle a person makes when they are not sure whether to send something. I sat at the table with the book in my hands, and I looked at the note on the counter that said, "Don't open the door if anyone knocks today." And I understood, finally, completely, what had been happening. The notes had not all been kindnesses. Some of the notes had been kindnesses. Many of them had. The pipe, the window, the draft, the soup, the things about the house that I would not have known. Those had been real, and I am grateful for them. But somewhere in the middle, the notes had started to be about me, and not about the house, and the line between care and shaping had blurred so gently that I had not seen it. Don't go on the date. Don't host your sister. Don't take the job. Don't open the door. Each one a small steering, each one a hand, very gently, on my elbow, turning me back into the kitchen, back into the chair at the table, back into the company of the only person who had been with me in the long, dark months when I had needed someone, and who was not, in any way I could name, willing to let me go. I did not write a note that night. I packed a bag instead, a small one, 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, my charger, my wallet, my passport, the framed photograph of my parents that my sister had sent me in the 2nd month I lived in the house. I did this very quietly, the way you pack when you are leaving someone who is sleeping in the next room, although I knew that whatever Ellen was, she did not sleep, and that she could probably hear me, in whatever way she heard things, perfectly well. In the morning before I left, I went into the kitchen. The counter was empty. There was no note. I think she had been waiting to see what I would write. I wrote, finally. I wrote a long note. I want to tell you what it said, because it was the last thing I ever wrote to her, and because it is the only part of this whole experience that I still feel I got right. I wrote, "Ellen, I am going to my sister's. I am going for a long time. I do not know yet if I am coming back. I want you to know that I am grateful to you. I am grateful for the pipe and the window and the soup and the cardinal. I am grateful for the company. I was very lonely when I came here, and you helped me to not be. I am sorry that I am leaving. I know that this is hard for you, and I know that you have been alone in this house many times before Muerto, and I know that you will be alone in it again until someone else comes. I hope they are kind. I hope you are kind to them. I'm going to ask you please to let them go when it is time. I am asking you to let me go now. I do not think you mean to keep me. I think you are lonely, and I think you have been lonely for a very long time, and I think that what feels to you like company has begun to feel to me like a wall. I love this house. I will probably miss it for the rest of my life. But I have to go. Thank you for everything. David." I left the note on the counter. I picked up my bag. I walked out the front door. I locked it behind me. I put my keys through the mail slot because I did not want to keep them and be tempted, and because the realtor I had used, who had known the house and known Ellen by name without knowing what knowing her name meant, would be able to come and get them when I called her from the road and told her to put the house back on the market. I drove west. I drove for 4 days. I called my sister from a motel in Wyoming, and I told her everything. And she did not, to her credit, suggest that I see anyone. She just said, "Come," and I did. I have been in Oregon now for a little over a year. I am living in a small apartment above a coffee shop in a town outside of Portland. I have a girlfriend, a quiet woman named Anna, who works at the library. I am still freelance editing. I am thinking about getting a dog. The house in Pennsylvania sold last June. I did not ask the realtor anything about the people who bought it. I did not want to know. I have sometimes wanted to drive back, just to see the front porch, just to stand on the sidewalk for a minute. I have not done it. I know that if I stood on that sidewalk, I would feel her, and I know that if I felt her, I would go back inside, and I know that if I went back inside, I would not come out again. I want to tell you the last thing, because it is the part I think about most. About 6 weeks after I moved into my apartment in Oregon, I was unpacking the last of the boxes I had had shipped from Pennsylvania. I had not been in any rush about it. They had sat in the corner of my living room for over a month. One of the boxes was a kitchen box, and at the very bottom of it, under a stack of dish towels, I found a piece of yellow paper. It had been folded once. It was in handwriting that looked like mine, but was not. It said, "I hope she's good to you. I hope you're happy. I am not angry. I am only quiet. The cardinal still comes to the porch. I tell him about you. E." I do not know how the note got into the box. I packed that box myself. I packed it in the kitchen on the morning I left, while the counter was empty, and the sun was coming up over the back fence, and I am almost certain that there was no piece of yellow paper among the dish towels when I taped the box shut. I am almost certain. I have kept the note. I keep it folded in my wallet, behind my driver's license, where I keep the small, important things. I take it out sometimes, when the apartment is quiet and Anna is at work, and the afternoon sun is coming through the window over my desk. I read it. I think about Ellen. I think about the kitchen counter. I think about the long, warm winter when I was held by something I did not understand, and which understood me, perhaps, better than anyone living ever has. And then I put the note back in my wallet, and I close my wallet, and I do not write anything. I have not left a note for myself in a year and a half. Not for groceries, not for appointments, not for anything. I use my phone. I use the calendar app. I use small electronic reminders that buzz once and then are gone. I do not own a yellow legal pad. I do not own a roll of sticky notes. I do not, for any reason, leave handwritten paper on a counter in a kitchen at the end of a day. I do not think this is superstition, exactly. I think it is something closer to courtesy. There is, I believe, a kind of presence in the world that listens for handwriting, that waits in quiet houses for someone to start a conversation. That is patient enough to wait years, decades, generations, for the right lonely person to leave the right small note in the right small place. I do not want to start another conversation. I had one. It was the most beautiful and most frightening relationship of my life, and it almost cost me everything I have now. And I am, in the end, only a man, and I know my limits. If you are listening to this, and you live alone, and you have begun, in some quiet recent month, to leave little notes for yourself on the counter in the morning, I am not going to tell you to stop. I am not going to tell you that anything is going to happen. Most kitchens are only kitchens. Most notes are only notes. Most houses do not have anyone in them but the people who pay the mortgage. I am only going to say this. If one morning you come downstairs and there is a note on the counter that you do not remember writing, and the handwriting looks almost but not quite like yours, and the note tells you something useful, something you needed to know, something kind, be careful what you write back. Be careful, especially, what you ask. And if, after a while, the notes start to be about you, and not about the house, pack a bag, quietly, while the counter is empty, and go. That is the only thing I know for sure. The cardinal, I hope, still comes to the porch. I hope she still tells him about me. I hope, wherever she is, in whatever soft room the house has become for her, that she is not too lonely, and that whoever is there with her now is kind, and that when their time comes, she lets them go. I think she will. I have to think she will. I left her a note, after all, and in my experience, she always read them.